Now then, you curious cats, welcome to... I sound so hip there. I'm Burnsy, welcome to another episode of the Curiosity Podcast, the CuriosityCast, which is your chance to ask questions of various people, the best brains in Hull. You can ask them anything you like. We'd like questions about Hull, but we've had loads of those. You can ask about anything. One of the top brains in Hull is back for a second appearance because we had so many questions last time. We thought we'd get him back on the programme. Dr Robb Robinson is a maritime and British historian, easy for me to say, at the University of Hull. And we've loads of questions to come, but I'm going to start with a question I've got because this is where we ended the conversation last time Rob was in. And it was about his new book. I'm giving you the plug here, Rob. Nice to see you again, by the way. Remind us what the book's called.
It's called From Agnes to Zebedee, Pioneers of the Great City of Hull. OK,
so my question on the Curiosity Cast is, who the heck was Agnes?
Sister Agnes Walsh. Sister Agnes Walsh was a nun. She went to work in Ireland. Later on, she went to the Holy Land. And when the Second World War broke out, she found herself in France. They thought she was Irish because she'd worked in Ireland, and she remained there. And during her period of time in Ireland, she sheltered a Jewish family at great risk to herself and to the religious house she was working with. But they were saved, they lived as a result of that. And as a result of that, she was honoured for the work that she'd done. So it's one of those perhaps not as well-known stories as it should be, but certainly somebody who has done a lot in a way for people at great risk to themselves.
Read Rob's book and find out more. You're going to find out more now because this is an associated question. I'd never heard of her, if I'm honest, but I've heard of some of the famous people that have come from the fine city of Kingston upon Hull. But Anonymous in Hessel wants to know, who is the most famous person to come from Hull? We can talk about him, but that's a tough question to answer.
Yeah, well, it's a bit famous, a bit like beauty, isn't it? It's in the eye of the beholder. Okay. And in different ages, somebody who might be very famous in one age, is forgotten in another age. William Mason, I mentioned in the last episode, he was reckoned to be the most famous living poet in the late 18th century. Who remembers him today? Very few. And it's the same. But I suppose one person who transcends everybody, and when I'm abroad and I spend a lot of time travelling, he's known by people across the world, is William Wilberforce. Yep. Virtually everybody knows something of William Wilberforce. But if you think about that, Andrew Marvell is another well-known person, a poet. Amy Johnson, again known in so many different circles. We tend to plug those people, and perhaps Larkin, who doesn't come from Hull, but nevertheless we claim it as our own. But there are lots of others. What about John Bacchus Dykes, for instance?
Who?
John Bacchus Dykes. Everybody knows John Bacchus Dykes' music. The most famous maritime hymn in the world, Eternal Father, Strong to Save. That tune was written by John Bacchus Dykes, who lived in Hull, or was born in Hull, and of course it was played when the US president was assassinated.
Which
Kennedy,
one? There's been a few. Kennedy, right.
Kennedy. When Kennedy was assassinated, it was played when they carried, just the tune, when they carried his body up to the Capitol and when they lowered him into the grave. It was Roosevelt's favourite song, and of course a hymn, and it was played when he met with Churchill.
A whole bloke wrote it.
He wrote the music.
Right.
What he used to do, he wrote the music. He became a clergyman. He wrote music for a lot of other people's prose or verse and set them to music. So he produced lots and lots of hymns. But as I said, the most famous maritime hymn in the world, the most famous tune, was written by a man from Hull.
We'll talk some more famous names, including some musicians. Just going back to Wilberforce, abolished slavery, it was the driving force. Do we make enough of him? I know there's a museum and everything like that,
I'm going to be controversial here.
Go on, be controversial on the Curiosity Cast.
We make a lot of Wilberforce.
Brace yourselves.
But I would rather see us make something of many of the other people who come from the city as well. I think Wilberforce is brilliant, and what he did was brilliant and everything about it. But really, for example, Sylvia Meek, who died in 2000 14. She played a major role in the eradication or the certainly reduction of malaria. She ran the malaria consortium. Right. She went during her period of time in charge, some 20 years. I think the number of deaths globally from malaria dropped from something like 840,000 to about 450,000. What an achievement. Somebody who I think in the future will become very well known, but perhaps not as well known as they would be today. She went to Newland School, brought up at Newland Park. Dad was a doctor and went on to do all that across the world. So really, and only died a few years ago. How do we think, about other people such as, Winifred Holtby, the writer? There are lots of people who come from Hull, and I think it's great that we make a lot of Wilberforce, Marvel, etc. But I really would like us to see us rattle the cage about some of the other famous people who come from this city.
I'm going to be in agreement with you. When I had a radio show, I thought one of the problems of this city was we didn't shout loud enough about the people who came from this city as a beacon of achievement for this city. And I was thinking Mick Ronson, one of the greats in music. Didn't make enough of him. The legendary, because I helped save his house down Holderness Road where he was born, J. Arthur Rank was a titan of British entertainment and everything like that. Can I tell this story? Well, we tried to get, I think, Robert Scorsese. Was it Scorsese? Martin Scorsese. Yeah. Robert was his lesser-known brother. To come to Hull to open the Rank House down there because he was inspired by J. Arthur Rank. I mean, he was a type. Do we do enough in this city?
No, we don't. Take another one. John Enderby Jackson. You might think, who the heck's John Enderby Jackson?
I'll say that. Who the heck's John Enderby Jackson?
John Enderby Jackson was the man who basically founded brass band competition. He was an impresario, took it across the world. Is there anything more northern or cultural giving us an image than brass band competition? The man who developed that idea of competition, they still compete to his rules today, was from Hull. It's across the world.
We've gone all Brighouse and Rastrick, haven't we?
Yeah. Well,
we're down with the kids on the Curiosity. I didn't know that. What a great name. Crazy guy. Yeah. Crazy name. And I'm still not sure I got Scorsese right, but anyway.
I think it's near enough.
We shall would not move on. I mean, who else is there? Famous actors?
How many do we want to name? We've got Carmichael. We've got Ricks. Barry Rutter in more recent times. We've got lots of people.
At this point on the CuriosityCast.
My mate Matt Sutton.
All right, he's a good lad.
Yeah.
At this point on the CuriosityCast, or just a few seconds ago when Brian Ricks was mentioned, our trousers fell down. Yeah. We can only apologise.
Didn't you try to get them flying at half-mast at one time?
It's my trousers are always at half-mast. I've got long legs. So, we can only apologise that it's not envisioned the CuriosityCast. It's probably a good thing, really.
What, with me taking my socks off last episode?
Last episode, I'll never get over your toes. And we've got modern potential superstars. I'm hoping Lucy Beaumont goes really, big, and is there anybody sort of grabbing you think they're going to be?
Well, I think Lucy Beaumont's great. She is one of my utterly favourite people in terms of I like the way she takes our accent and puts it in people's faces in the way I think more people should do.
Spinning off this, Paula in HU3, which somewhere in the Hull City Centre, Hessel Road area. We don't stalk you, by the way. We don't ask for the specific address. We just, when a question comes in, tell us roughly where you are, give us your postcode. So Paula's in HU3. Who's the most famous person to perform in Hull?
Well, I always remember watching people at Skyline Ballroom and the likes. I think
it's a legendary venue, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. Hendrix, I can remember. Hendrix. But you remember the Beatles were on in Hull, the Stones were on in Hull. The Who live at Leeds should of course be the Hull live in Hull in various places. So lots of people.
Was that at the Tower on Lanlibby Road? It was recorded. Was City Hall? Was it?
Yeah.
That's producer Dave, by the way, showing his knowledge. He's just quietly there on Curiosity.
And they couldn't use it. Why? It was a better recording, according to Roger Dalton.
But there was a problem with the sound or something.
The bass. They didn't record the bass. But they've since taken the bass from Live at Leeds, put it onto Hull and released Live in Hull.
And just while we're talking music, there's a great little film of the Rolling Stones performing at the ABC, isn't there?
And there's a piece of them hitching out of Hull as well on the A63. Yeah, it's a great piece. But we have a whole host of people over that area. But if you go back a bit further, one of the most famous superstars of the 19th century was Paganini. You know, he's said to have sold his soul to the devil, not to play the guitar, but to play the violin. And he performed down at the theatre, which was down Humber Street.
I thought it was
very
a fruit market.
Well famous part. Well,
was there a theatre down there?
There was a theatre, that big theatre down Humber Street. In its day. So quite an important people itself. And I think you and I both did a bit of chasing on Paul Simon having played in Hull at the Rugby Tavern. Didn't you remember?
I remember on the radio, yeah. Was it true? I couldn't...
Yeah.
Bluebell, he played at Bluebell.
At the Bluebell,
did he?
Yeah, when Bluebell had the folk club upstairs.
Yeah.
He was on there, definitely. And one of the last gigs ever played by Nick Drake was at Here Within.
Right.
I never knew.
Beverly Road. Who else? Some very famous comedians.
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Laurel and Hardy, I suppose, one of the most famous people to have played locally in town, but all sorts of people over the years had played. And you're surprised when you see the names coming up. Personally, a personal connection in a sense, a bit distant, but my great-granddad set Houdini a challenge.
Your great-granddad was Houdini?
Set Houdini a challenge. Set Houdini a challenge.
I was going to say.
Yeah. No, it was a bit tied up to do that. So no, but
Tish. Have we got a sound effect?
We have.
Yay!
My great-granddad was secretary of the Hull Seamen's Union.
Right.
And him and several members of his executive set a challenge to Houdini that they would strap him to a piece of wood with using seamen's knots, etc. And he accepted the challenge. He escaped, of course, because he went on to do other things. But it's an interesting one. Houdini was quite a regular in Hull, and a lot of people like that, I suppose, would have come over the years.
My great uncle swam with Johnny Weissmuller.
Where?
Off Brid.
Off Brid?
Yeah.
Why? They weren't filming a Tarzan film off Brid, were they?
After he did the Tarzan films, he'd go around and do celebrity appearances.
Yeah.
And my uncle was a very fit bloke, and they asked for two fit blokes to swim with Johnny Weissmuller. They tied Johnny Weissmuller to a boat and dragged Johnny Weissmuller doing this. So he looked very good.
He's doing the front crawl here, Dave, just beautifully, like a proper front crawler.
Get a job in the Olympics.
Struggling behind him, so Johnny Weissmuller looked dead fit and fast.
Right.
There you go. So Johnny Weissmuller.
Didn't just slightly digressing on the CuriosityCast, didn't the first time surfing was done in the UK was Bridlington, wasn't it?
Was indeed.
We're on it now.
Yeah. They've got
any surf music, Dave?
They've got a plaque up there. It was. It literally. It eat your heart out. The first surfing done in this country, which I think was done by, I might have got it wrong, Tahitian princes who were staying in Brid, as you did doing then those days.
Yeah. Where should we go on our world tour? Yeah, let's go to Brid.
Yeah.
Louis Armstrong, we should mention.
Okay.
Yeah. Louis Armstrong, definitely.
Did he go surfing off Bridlington?
Played at Beverrow Baths, didn't he?
Did he?
Yeah,
Louis Armstrong.
They covered they used to have gigs there and covered the pool with floorboards. And Louis Armstrong once played. There's a picture of him getting off the train at Paragon Station.
In the baths?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's in the baths, but it's in the archive.
Yeah.
And going further back, and I don't know whether he played the trumpet or not, Charles Dickens?
Charles Dickens, of course, came to Hull on occasion.
To do
and
what?
Of course, well, if
to
Charles
perform?
Charles Dickens regularly performed reading from his book, doing excerpts, and of course, the place that you would immediately know him from, of course, is what is now the new theatre, which was the Assembly Rooms, and he appeared on stage there. Dickens did that across the world, if you think about it. He made tours to the States, he made tours around the UK. So yeah, he was known, he was a famous figure in Hull.
So we still don't know who the most famous person to perform in Hull, but like Rob says, it's sort of subjective. We'll move on, I think, to a sports-related question. Well, it is a sports question. From Emma in North Hull. Did the rules of football start in Hull? Even I know the answer to this one.
Well, no.
Oh,
but,
I thought I knew the answer to this
you
one.
Do, but
that's why we've got the CuriosityCast.
But the man who codified the rules, of course, did come from Hull, but he did them when he lived in London. So it didn't sit in Hull and wasn't inspired necessarily by playing football. But of course, he was a very famous man in terms of all the sports that he was involved with. And of course, that was an important part of it.
We should name him.
Yeah, I forgot his name.
He's that famous. Dr Robb Robinson has forgotten. Ebenezer Cobb Morley.
Ebenezer Cobb Morley, yeah. Sorry, Ebenezer Cobb Morley was the man who codified the rules. And Ebenezer Cobb Morley came from Hull, but he was a famous sportsman. He was a sculler. He ran a pack of hounds, did all sorts of things in London. And one of the things he did was play some football. And the important part about that is, and think about it in terms of other sports, we often think all these sports were invented in Britain. Well, what it probably was with a lot of them was versions were played elsewhere. But of course, we were the first country in the world to get a railway network. Between the 1840s and 1860s, we got a railway network. People start getting Saturday afternoons off. They start playing sport. They start playing people from other towns or other areas who have different rules, lengths, different whatever it be. And lots of sports, people sat down and codified the rules. And this was a very important set of rules, obviously because of the reach of football. But of course it happens in other sports. But it's interesting to think that it was a person from Hull who moved on to London, but who did this for the rules. And it's interesting to think as well in terms of that, while we're on football, is that other people from this city played such an important role later on. Think about Flo Bilton. And think about the flag she flew for women's football at a period of time when the FA actively, this was in the 60s and 70s and 80s, wasn't it?
Right.
Flo Bilton had worked for, I think it was Reckitt's. She was asked to organise a match against Smith and Nephew, football match. She was about 40 by that time. She played the match and then set about helping people develop football. She played a major role. Football for women had been very important in the First World War. When men had gone off to fight the war, women started playing football, and it got very popular and remained popular straight after the war. There was a match on the Boulevard in about 1921. 15,000 people attended, and quite not long afterwards, another match on Adlerby Road where over 10,000 went. And then within a few months of that, the FA banned football for women at any of their members' grounds. And of course it set back football for decades. And it was really this work of Flo Bilton did in the latter part of the 20th century that really got football going again. And women's football owes so much to people like Flo Bilton.
When you think about it, some of the daft things organisations and governments and what have you have done over the years, it's bonkers really. But anyway, we'll move on. This is the CuriosityCast, and I do hope you're enjoying it. Dr Robb Robinson is our guest again, the second time he's appeared on the programme. If you've got a question, you can send us your question and we'll answer it in either the next podcast or in the content you can find on the Curiosity social feeds. So if you're all over Twitter, if you search for Curiosity Hull, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, and you can get us online at www.curiosityhull.co.uk. I think I've got all the dots in the right places. You'll find out, but www.curiosityhull.co.uk. Ta for your company, ta for taking the time to find the CuriosityCast. And this is not the only one. If you're just sort of joining us for the first time, there are other episodes out there, and you'll enjoy them. I won't guarantee that because you wouldn't get any money back if you thought, well, that was a bit dull, Burnsy. But I think you'll enjoy them. There's all sorts of stuff, and do get your questions in because your questions will help this live or die, frankly. So the responsibility is yours. Sorry, that was a bit over the top there. I can only apologise.
I thought that was quite appropriate.
Yeah. Emma, a different Emma. This one's in Hessel, my manor. How many different sports clubs are there in Hull? How do you answer that? Have you any idea?
Right, well, it is difficult to quantify what do you mean by sport, how many clubs has there been over the years. But what is important, something we referred to in terms of football, is that in the 19th century there was a massive explosion in sport and leisure activities of all kinds. And the railways, as I say, contributed to that. And a lot of important clubs that came from Hull were amongst the pioneers. Think about my own sport, athletics. City of Hull Athletic Club started as Hull Harriers in the 1880s. Not that many years later, East Hull Harriers started.
I'm looking at you, I'm thinking middle distance. 400 metres?
No, 1,500 metres and
higher. Middle distance.
Yeah.
Were you like a gazelle, Rob?
Oh, no. I was never like a gazelle, but I was pretty fast for my size, but not fast enough. Yeah, but if you think about the sports themselves, all sorts of things. Think about Hull FC, founded 1865. Really, what was it doing originally? It wasn't quite rugby as we would know it today, but eventually they plumped for rugby. Hull KR comes along a bit later on. Then we get, of course, the creation of the Northern Union in the mid-1890s, which is a watershed and a defining moment for rugby in the north of England. And Hull clubs were very much involved in that. So across the city, so many different clubs were formed in so many different ways.
Emma, if you get bored in Hessel, and I don't see why you should get bored in Hessel, fantastic place, you could count them and do let us know. Drop us a line if you want a guess at that, or you'll do some proper research on it. Emma, thank you for that. I really like this question, and I wouldn't know why this question came about. But Sam in HU13, again from Hessel, all the bright people are obviously hanging out on my manor at the moment, but I've no idea why this question has come into the CuriosityCast. But Dr Robb Robinson, I might well get this. Do you understand the question as to where's this come from? Was the umbrella invented in Hull?
Well, that what's fascinating about that question is the umbrella was developed, or the umbrella that we think of today, rather than the parasol, was invented by a man called Samuel Fox. Okay. And he was from Derbyshire, right. And he was a wire drawer. It means he pulls wire out, which is just the sort of thing you need to be able to do to make umbrellas. He made quite a bit of money, and he settled in East Yorkshire. I think that was a thing. And he had a lot to do with the village of Northcliffe. I think he helped build the church there. He didn't just live in Northcliffe, he lived in various other places, but he's buried in Northcliffe. And of course, the umbrella that he developed is still, still used by many people of culture across the world.
Does it say on his grave, Samuel Fox, inventor of the umbrella?
I don't know. I'll have to have a look next time I'm going past it. It's a big grave.
Somebody let us know.
Yeah.
It would be nice to know. And obviously, Sam in Hessel, if it had been invented around here, it would have been called the Humberella. Wouldn't it? The Humber. Do you get that right?
I got that exactly.
Oh, I think that's the high spot, or the low spot of the CuriosityCast has been found.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sort of example, is that a voiceless glot? We removed the voiceless glottal fricative, haven't we, really?
Have we?
I think we have.
Blimey. Doctor, please remove my voiceless...
voiceless glottal fricative. I think that's how you say it. Yeah,
we'll be getting banned.
Yeah.
Ah, dear. So here's one for you. We've touched on Rovers and Hull FC, so east and west in the city. Why Maisie in East Hull wants to know, why is there a West Park and an East Park, but no North Park or South Park?
Well, if we had a South Park, it would be a water park, wouldn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah, it'd be very
damp. Nothing wrong with that.
No,
Hello to the South Hull Massive, by the way, if you're listening to the CuriosityCast.
Yeah. And if you think about North, at the idea of a North Park, well, much of what we now think of North Hull until almost the end of the 19th century was actually part of the parish of Cottingham, so it wouldn't have been around. And I suppose what was north of the city when it was built was Pearson Park, we think of Pearson Park as being well in the city now, but the city really extended at that period of time to the end of Springbank West up Beverley Road part of the way. So this was, this is your North Park in a sense, but it's rather well in the town today.
And we're actually quite well endowed for parks, aren't we?
We're very well endowed for parks. They're a green lung of the city, and they're a thing we should make much, much more of. We do pretty well with them, but we could do more because they are such an asset to this city.
Okay. Here's one which I always assumed to be true, but maybe you might tell me it's not. Is it true that the Civil War started in the old White Hart? Or is it a myth? There's been a few scraps maybe on a Friday night in there once people have been on the sherbet a little too
I love
much.
that one. It sounds a little bit like, the Ian Drury, Ian Drury's sort of, I could be the catalyst that sparks the revolution
Very
bit.
good.
Yeah.
Very
But
good.
if you think about it, no, the argument was that, of course, people met together on St George's Day in 1642 and plotted to keep the King Charles I out of Hull. They certainly met to keep King Charles out, but the conventional story today among historians is really, it's probably to do with a meeting in 1688 when they decided to overthrow the representatives of the king in Hull, the King James II. This was the time of what we call the so-called Glorious Revolution, when James II was deposed and replaced by William of Orange and Mary, his wife, who was actually the daughter of James. It's quite a story in itself. But they met together in Hull, and almost certainly it was in that building. What I like about that particular version of the story as well is I get really a bit irked because we have an ambiguous relation as a king's town. We have an ambiguous relationship with the royal family in this city. If you think about it, where do we have monarchs in public? We have them on top of toilets, which is curious. But it's more to do with people get rather embarrassed. Oh, we've got the king coming, but we kept one of his ancestors out. Well, actually, the Glorious Revolution, the outcome of that was that the king, the new king coming in, agreed to rule in tandem with Parliament. It was basically the formation of our constitutional monarchy that we had today. And rather than being embarrassed about this to the royal family, they should be quite pleased that we had helped we played a small role in creating the vehicle, the constitutional monarchy.
Should we make more of it,
to this day? Yes, definitely. And it brings in one of my famous people. We mentioned famous people earlier on. One of my most famous people, as far as I'm concerned, who came from Hull, was a man called Matthew Alured.
Never heard of him.
Matthew Alured was born in the Charterhouse, or the Charterhouse area. He and his brother went on to become colonels in the English Civil War. His brother was a regicide. Died before King Charles came the back. But Matthew was never a regicide. But he later, after being a very successful Civil War colonel and taking part in various battles, indeed he captured the Scottish government for Cromwell. He later fell out with Cromwell because he thought he was assuming too many roles of being a king, and that Parliament had the important role. He helped overthrow Cromwell's son. He later he went into the political wilderness when the Restoration came about, but he survived long enough to play a part in the background for the Glorious Revolution. He lived a very long life, and he, to me, is one of those heroes of the city.
And there, we're going to bring to an end this latest episode of the CuriosityCast. Our thanks to Dr Robb Robinson. I've been Burnsy. I will be the next time, hopefully, as well. We'll talk to Rob again. Don't forget his new book, Agnes to Zebedee. We'll go with Zebedee next time to start the show. Don't forget, you can join in www.curiosityhull.co.uk, or you can find Curiosity Hull on all the social platforms. Ta for taking the time. Tell your mates about it. Talk to you soon.